Never date these types of women. But what this really means is deeper than you think. There's a pattern most men don't notice when it starts happening in real time. It doesn't feel like rejection, and it doesn't feel like a clear no. Instead, it feels like possibility, like something could happen if you just do a little more. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Because you're not being pushed away, you're just never fully pulled in either, and that in-between space quietly becomes where most men lose clarity and time. Most men assume confusion means she's complicated or hard to read, but in reality, confusion usually signals inconsistency in interest rather than depth. When attraction is real, it may not be perfect, but it is usually clear enough that you don't need to constantly interpret it. The problem starts when you begin making excuses for her and treating mixed signals like a puzzle you're supposed to solve. You start analyzing messages, timing, tone, and behavior like a detective, and without realizing it, you've shifted from experiencing connection to decoding it. Before we go further, if you're into raw attraction psychology that actually explains what's happening in modern dating, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Chapter 1. The low interest type. When someone is genuinely interested, there is a certain emotional stability to it, even if it's not intense all the time. You don't feel like you're constantly restarting the interaction from zero, and you're not always guessing where you stand. But when interest is unstable, you start filling the gaps with hope instead of facts. You tell yourself she's busy or distracted or just not good at texting, even when the pattern keeps repeating itself. At that point, the issue is no longer what she's doing, but what you're choosing to ignore. Because real attraction doesn't require decoding every interaction just to feel secure in it. And the longer you stay in that decoding phase, the more normal confusion starts to feel, even though it was never supposed to be part of a healthy connection in the first place. Chapter 2. The hot and cold type. There are moments when she's fully engaged, replies quickly, jokes, and gives attention that feels real and present. Then suddenly, without any clear reason, that energy drops and you're left dealing with distance that feels like a reset. Instead of stepping back, most men try to recover the earlier version of her. It feels like something was lost and can be restored if you just adjust your effort or timing. But attraction doesn't behave like something that randomly breaks and needs fixing. If connection keeps switching on and off, the issue is not your timing, it's the stability of interest itself. And what makes it even trickier is how quickly you adapt to it, convincing yourself that inconsistency is just part of modern dating, when in reality, it's usually a sign of uneven investment. Chapter 3. The flaky type. At first, it starts normally with plans being made and a bit of excitement building around them. Then suddenly something comes up and the plan is postponed, which feels understandable because life does happen. But when that pattern repeats, something subtle begins to change in your behavior. You stop planning normally and start planning around uncertainty, almost waiting for things to fall through. And without noticing it, you become more available than you should be, adjusting your schedule around someone who is not doing the same for you. It starts feeling like you're always on standby for a moment that may or may not happen. Over time, you don't realize that the standard has shifted, because what once felt like inconsistency now feels normal enough to tolerate. Chapter 4. The ones who test you. Sometimes the interaction feels like a normal conversation, but underneath it, there are small moments designed to test how you react. A comment that feels slightly provocative, a joke that pushes a boundary, or a question that feels more like evaluation than curiosity. And because you don't want to mess it up, you start adjusting your responses, trying to appear calm, confident, or correct. Without realizing it, you've turned a natural interaction into a performance, but real attraction doesn't feel like passing a series of emotional tests. It feels like being understood, not constantly evaluated for the right reaction. And the irony is that the more you try to pass those tests, the less natural the connection becomes, because you're no longer being yourself in it. Chapter 5. The disrespectful type. Disrespect rarely shows up in obvious ways at the beginning, which is why it's so easy to miss. It starts in small moments like interruptions, dismissive responses, or subtle jokes that slowly shift the tone of how you're treated. Because it doesn't feel extreme, it's often ignored or laughed off. You tell yourself it's not serious enough to address, so you let it slide. But respect doesn't suddenly appear later when things become more serious. It is usually already present or absent in those early interactions where nothing is even at stake yet. And over time, what felt small in the beginning becomes the default tone of the dynamic. Chapter 6. The one who sees you as another option. There are situations where she is present, responsive, and engaged, but something still feels slightly off. You are not being rejected outright, but you are also not being fully chosen. And that creates a strange emotional space where you feel like you are part of a rotation rather than a priority. You notice patterns like delayed replies, inconsistent effort, or attention that feels divided. Instead of stepping away, many men try harder to stand out, believing effort will eventually shift things in their favor. But you cannot compensate for divided attention with increased effort, because attraction built on comparison never feels secure. It always feels like competition. Chapter 7. The no accountability type. In some dynamics, every past situation has a clear villain, but it is never her. Exes are always the problem, friends are always toxic, and timing is always unlucky, no matter the pattern. At first, this doesn't seem unusual, because everyone has complicated experiences. But over time, you start noticing that nothing ever seems to change from one situation to the next. Because when there is no accountability, there is no real adjustment happening. The story keeps repeating itself with different people, but the structure stays the same. And when that pattern continues long enough, you realize it is not about past situations anymore. It is about an unwillingness to reflect on them. Chapter 8. The low-effort type. In the beginning, effort feels balanced enough that you don't question it. You initiate, you plan, you follow up, and the interaction feels alive because you are carrying most of the momentum. But over time, you start noticing that your effort is what keeps everything moving forward. Without it, the interaction slows down or disappears entirely. And instead of pulling back, you often try harder, thinking consistency will eventually be matched. But effort does not automatically create reciprocity. It usually just extends imbalance until one person eventually burns out and realizes they were maintaining something that wasn't mutual. Chapter 9. The time waster. This is one of the most confusing dynamics because it doesn't feel like rejection. There is presence, communication, and familiarity, but there is never real direction or definition. And that lack of clarity creates a strange sense of potential that keeps you emotionally attached. You start believing that something meaningful is just slightly out of reach. But over time, you realize you've spent more time in the almost than in anything real. And what felt like a slow build was actually just delay disguised as connection. Because limbo is not a stage of progress, it is a stage of pause that never moves forward on its own. Conclusion. The real issue is not about labeling people or turning dating into categories. It is about recognizing patterns early enough to respond to them instead of emotionally rewriting them. Most men do not struggle because they lack opportunity. They struggle because they stay too long in situations that were already unclear from the beginning, and clarity is usually present much earlier than they are willing to admit. Attraction, when it is real, does not require constant interpretation or emotional guesswork. The more confusion you experience, the more likely it is that the answer is already in front of you, you just haven't acted on it yet. If this resonated with you, like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Have you ever dealt with a woman who shouldn't have been in your life in the first place? And how was the experience? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned for the next breakdown in attraction psychology.